on stage. Round of applause.
I remember the familiar ritual of test day. The rustle of papers, the nervous energy in the room. For most, it was a moment of anticipation, sometimes dread, but for me, it was almost a formality. I knew the outcome before I ever even saw the grade. Consistently high, often perfect. This wasn't arrogance, by the way. It was simply the predictable outcome of my academic journey. I was a smart kid. I was the student that made every teacher smile and every other student roll their eyes. So school, easy. Too easy, perhaps. And maybe that was the very thing that blinded me to the importance of understanding a different kind of data. The data that comes from failure. Because when you grow up always excelling at stuff, you start to think the rules don't apply to you. You start to believe you're untouchable. That illusion shattered when I left home to attend university abroad. Now, for the first time, I had freedom. No one calling to see if I went to class. No one checking if I had done my assignments. And guess what? I didn't. Not really. I spent my time partying. So, there in school, I didn't bother with classes, barely did any assignments, didn't prepare for tests, because I was going to wing it like I had always done, and it would all work out. Until it didn't. Final exams rolled by, I did what I'd always done. Nothing. Why? Because I felt like I had mastered the game. So, fast forward to results day. I woke up, checked my email, and suddenly wish I hadn't. My grades didn't just fall. They threw themselves off a cliff. If that moment had a theme sound, it would be the dramatic dun, dun, dun of a horror movie. And then it hit me. I wasn't some untouchable genius. I too could fail. And I just did. Woefully. Long story short, I had to withdraw from school. Now, if you've ever experienced real gut-wrenching failure, let me see your hands. My people, great. So you know it doesn't just hurt your pride, it shakes your identity. Suddenly, I wasn't the golden student anymore. I wasn't the smart kid. I was the guy who messed up so bad, he had to tuck his tail between his legs and run back home in shame. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you know what it feels like to have your confidence shattered. To feel like everything you thought you knew about yourself was a lie. Maybe it wasn't school. Maybe it was a job loss, a business that failed, a relationship that crumbled. We all have that moment where we realize we're not untouchable. So, standing there, staring at that stark symbol of failure, I felt lost. But that moment, that gut-wrenching setback, it wasn't an end. It was the first crucial data point in a research project I had no idea I was embarking on. Understanding the true nature of failure and its surprising role in achieving success. Let's face it, we've all been handed our fair share of failed experiments in life. But are we truly analyzing the data? For too long, society has conditioned us to view data as a scarlet letter, something to be ashamed of and avoided at all costs. We see the highlight reels of success, the flawless victories, but rarely do we delve into the messy, data-rich reality of the stumbles along the way. But what if we have it all wrong? What if failure isn't a stop sign, but a detour? What if failure is one of the most important tools for success? Think about it. When we fail, we're not just experiencing an outcome. We're generating valuable pieces of information. We're gathering different categories of data. The first is process data. So what steps did you take, or in my case, didn't take? What was your strategy, or the glaring absence of one? Where did the process break down? In my case, the process data was screaming. 0 class attendance, minimal engagement with course material, absolutely no preparation for final exams. The breakdown wasn't just a subtle crack, it was a full-scale structural collapse. Next, we collect assumption data. So what underlying beliefs or assumptions did we hold that turned out to be spectacularly wrong? My primary assumption, the bedrock of my academic identity, was that my past successes were a foolproof guarantee of future triumphs, regardless of effort. Failure brutally exposed the fallacy of this assumption. Next, there's also skill gap data. This has to do with the skills or talents or knowledge that we lacked that directly contributed to the setback. Now, while I was good at absorbing and regurgitating information for tests, failure revealed a significant gap in crucial university-level skills. And my gifts had masked this deficit for the longest time. There's also environmental data. So what external forces had a role to play in the setback, even if we ultimately hold responsibility. In my case, the newfound freedom of university life was a significant environmental factor. Being away from the structure and the oversight I was accustomed to at home, I was ill-equipped to manage my time and my priorities effectively. Finally, and almost most importantly, is emotional response data. So, how did you respond to the setback? What emotions did it trigger? In my case, the confusion, the shame, the identity crisis, these raw emotional responses were tough to deal with, but they ultimately pushed me to face my vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, I came out with a stronger mindset. So, take a moment, think back to a recent failure, big or small. What valuable pieces of information did it provide you? What data points did it provide you? What did it say about your strategy, your skills, your assumptions, your environment, and your emotional landscape? Okay, so we've established that failure provides us with data, but raw data just sitting there doesn't do us much good. The real magic happens when we roll up our sleeves and try to make sense of it. It's like a pile of puzzle pieces, the individual failures. It all makes sense when we try to put them together and we see a bigger picture. So to do this, we need a structured framework. Let's call it the failure data analysis framework. The first step in analyzing our data is recording what happened, stripping away as much emotional bias as possible. When I received those devastating grades, my initial response was pure panic and shame. But to truly learn, I had to take a step back and objectively document what happened. I skipped classes, didn't bother with assignments, I didn't engage with the material. These objective facts, stark and undeniable, were a hard pill to swallow, but they ultimately built the foundation for my analysis. Now, when you have these facts, you need to look out for recurring themes. You need to recognize patterns. Has this happened before in the past, even on a smaller scale? Were there warning signs you ignored? Of course, for me, the answer was yes. You also need to go beyond understanding what happened and move to the why it happened. It wasn't enough to say, I failed. I had to ask, why did I fail so spectacularly? The answer, according to the data, was clear. I didn't engage with the material. And I didn't do that because, like I said, my mindset was, because I had succeeded in the past, I'll most likely succeed in the future. Now, identifying these flawed causal links were a pivotal moment in my understanding. And then the ultimate goal of this analysis is to extract concrete, actionable lessons, the so what of our failure data. We need to know what we are going to be doing moving forward. For me, it was obvious. I needed to develop discipline. I needed to rely more on effort than my belief of my skills, and I needed to actively engage with the content. Now, these weren't just abstract ideas, they were direct instructions I was going to implement when I went back to school the second time around. And so I did. So now we've extracted these valuable pieces of information, these insights. We need to put them into action. And you could do that by hypothesis generation and iterative improvement. So think of failure as informing your next attempt. You tried one way, it didn't work out. Now, based on the feedback you've received, what's your next hypothesis? What revised strategy are you going to implement? Failure data also provides invaluable information and feedback that can be useful for iteration. It's really about achieving perfection on the first try. Rather, it's about making small data-driven adjustments along the way and trying again and again and again. You also need to build resilience. Each time you analyze failure and you make a conscious decision to try again, you're making valuable deposits into your resilience database, and this better equips you to tackle on challenges in the future. And also, very importantly, you need to seek mentorship. Don't underestimate the value of seeking out individuals who have had their fair share of setbacks. Share your failures, share your analysis, share your insights with them. They offer help, support, and a shoulder to lean on. This helped me in more ways than one. Whew. It's a lot to take in, right? I know, but it's pretty simple. Don't be afraid to fail. When you do, ensure to gather and analyze the data, extract insights, and go at it again. Now, many of you might be asking, did learning from failure actually make a difference? Absolutely. When I went back to school the second time around, I wasn't just the smart kid. I was a student who understood the value of effort. 2 degrees later, learning from failure data has been invaluable, even in my career. It's helped me not just survive, but thrive in today's data-driven world. Now, let's connect this to the larger theme of embracing the uncharted. When you venture into uncharted territory, whether it's starting that business, chasing that crazy dream, or simply stepping outside of your comfort zone, failure is not just a possibility. It's often an inevitability. But by choosing to view those inevitable stumbles as valuable data points, you're not just stumbling in the dark. You're actively mapping the terrain, identifying potential pitfalls, and charting a more informed course forward. By ultimately shifting our mindsets from fearing failure to consciously and actively leveraging its data, we unlock a powerful and often untapped engine for growth and success. We move from being victims of our failure to more adaptable, informed, and successful individuals. So let me ask you, what would you do if failure weren't an option? What would you do? What would you do? What would you do? Would you start that business? Would you take that risk? Would you chase that dream? Because here's the truth. Failure is an option. But so is growth. So is resilience. So is success. I stand here before you today because I failed. And I know that sounds crazy. But it's true. And so will you. Every time you fail, you have two choices. Let it define you or let it refine you. So, go out there, chase dreams, take risks, and when, not if, you fail, remember this. You're not starting over. You're starting smarter. And that's how you fail forward. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow.